Well, if we talk about change, if we talk about innovation and change, one important element is communication. Not only to, let's say, your consumers as a company, but also internally in the organization. If you want to change direction in the organization, how do you communicate it? And in fact, there are several ways of doing that. You could say it could be written communication, it could be verbal communication, it could be visualized communication, and it could be experiential communication, meaning showing a prototype, doing a pilot. Four different types of communication. Now it's important to realize that point one, certain people are much better in written communication than in verbal or visualizing things or experiential, but that the people you communicate to have different learning styles. And depending on their learning style, they prefer more certain elements of communication than others. To put it in a very general term, roughly they say there are some four basic learning styles. The first category of learners are what called reflectors. Those are people who want to get the data. Why do we change? What's the reason? And they want to digest those data. There are other people who are theorists, who say, okay, collecting those data is nice, but we want to see correlation between data. We want to see how it's all interlinked. You have a third category called pragmatists. Those are people who say it's all nice to collect those data, to know how things are interlinked, but what are potential scenarios? What are potential things we could do? And you have a fourth category of learners, which are activists. Those are people who say, well, it's nice those data, it's nice those links and scenarios, but let's do it. In an organization, in very rough terms, you could say these are the thinkers and these are the doers. And they are in different functions. If you have a research department which is full of pragmatists and activists, there's something wrong in your recruitment policy. If at the other side you have salespeople who are reflectors and theorists, there's also something wrong, because the salespeople fall in this activist category. Research and developers fall here. Operational people, production, etc., fall sort of in this category. Strategic marketing falls in this category. It depends very much on the functions. Now, if you want to move a whole organization in a change process, you have to realize that you don't use the same type of communication for reflectors and theorists than you use for activists and pragmatists. In very rough terms, written communication, very nice here. Verbal communication, very nice here. Visualized or experiential, very much here. So it's a bit like the British so nicely say it, horses for courses. Use the right communication tools for the right audiences, because if you want to get people along in a change process, you have to know which forms you use. And of course we can learn a lot there from arts, from written communication. What is good storytelling? Look at writers. What is good verbal communication? Look at singers, look at storytellers who verbally tell the stories. Visualization, well, we've shown you a lot in the form of painting, etc. We talked about architects and prototyping, experiential pilot type of approach. So depending on the communication tools you want to use, you can influence people in an organization. Before the break, I would like to show you another short video to illustrate communication elements. Although it's about a painter, you will see it uses several forms of communication. How powerful this message is. And it's because it's combining in fact, 3 ways of communication. It's combining music, images, and a story. And that combination hits you deeper than if you have only one of them combined. So I think it's a very nice example of how communication can influence you very strongly. It's also, if I ask people, what do you think about this video? Some emphasize beauty. Others emphasize sadness. The way in which you interpret it is also the filter through which you look at it. But realize if you want to communicate, a lot of lessons you can learn from this on how you communicate on different senses and how the message becomes much stronger that way, just like with storytelling, as we're going to discuss after the break, than if you only use one of them sequentially. But before doing that, let me say a few more words about communication. I already said, if you can address written, verbal, visual, experiential type of learning and communication, if you can combine communication which addresses several senses at the same time, like the video on Starry, Starry Night on Van Gogh illustrated, that helps. What also helps is to look at literature and to look at storytellers. There's some famous storytellers in literature, and in fact, stories in an organization for a CEO helps people to make sense of things, to share knowledge and interpretation of events. And you can either present that in a very factual way, or you can do it in a way where you make a journey practically with your people and try to involve them. And the way you do that is in fact is using a few elements. Normally, what you should have is namely a disclosure about the storyteller that creates the emotional connection with the listeners. So you start with, I have investigated this or that, and therefore I think that. But then you quickly bring in, because you want to stimulate the whole team to go along with you, you introduce the we element in it to create a sense of we're one group. We have to achieve it together. What, by the way, should be the basis is always to look at where are we at the moment, and then where would we like to go. So the status quo, where do we want to go, then put in the story the I, the we, and then a realistic description of the present reality so that people also say, yeah, indeed, that's the situation we're in. That is what we want to address. And then articulate with people the future you want to achieve. And there are several examples from literature you could use to see how you could do that in such a passionate way that you get people along. The question is, however, that the style of storytelling can be different from one person to the other, and it has to fit your personality. I can't give you one rule and say those elements will certainly be in, but the way you present has to come across as natural. As soon as it's seen as that is a sort of rules of the game, the handbook on how to give a good speech, which you have derived somewhere, but which is far away from your own personality, people pick that immediately up. They have to see that it's really an in-depth feeling you have in that direction. And that's what, let's say, good storytellers try to achieve.